Hello, this is Alechius and welcome back to Sprocket tutorial series. Previously we roughed up a basic tank, saw that it was effective with no further tweaking. We improved upon the engine and the transmission. Today we're looking at suspension. Now, I said before, rest angle can be used to raise and lower the tank. So can the road wheel. And this just changes where the mount for the torsion bar is located. Or the bogies if you're using a bogie system. Now, things to note with the rest angle. I'm going to switch to the heavier version so we can see it more clearly. Here, let me spread out the wheels as well. There we go. Now we can see the wheel. The torsion bar is providing tension to the wheel. So if the tank hits a bump, the wheel's going to travel up and then back down. If it hits a dip, it's going to travel down and then back up. It's going to find some new balance between the hull and each wheel. So, if you lower it down, you're going to have less bump and you're going to bottom out more quickly. More likely for the wheel to bump up against the sponson or the fender, or deform the tracks on the top. And while it's great to lift the whole tank up this way, it gives you lots of bump travel, not so much dip travel. So the wheel's going to fall down into a dip, and then the tank's going to feel like it's falling. That doesn't work out too well. So on a drawing board, 0 looks great. Now, me personally, I like to have a little bit of a rest angle, something like -10. I like that. It looks nice to me, and I like it. If you wanted to narrow the wheels, that's what this adjustment slider is for. You see how the tracks kind of deform to the left and the right just a little bit. There's a whole theory about where you place these wheels on those tracks. I'm going to zero that out. We're going to do some other stuff first. I'm going to reduce the spacing on the wheels. We'll reduce it to 3 so we can see, and leave it with the heavier, because I want to actually see how this is traveling up and down and how much as we travel. I'm going to have to go to the smaller because I want to tweak it for the one I know. Just note that this is what it looks like behind the wheel. You can see just a little bit of it right there. So keep that in mind. So what I'm seeing is rather stiff suspension. And that raises wheels off the ground, like you saw as we pivoted across. That's bad for traction. Now, if it's too loose, let's go ahead and do that. And there's 2 kinds. Let's do something like that. You see the tank is sitting on the wheels. Like it immediately squatted down. Sure, the wheels are sticking to the ground, but it's bottoming out the suspension. Actually not handling bad for doing so. That's because it's a relatively light tank. What is it, 13 tons? But you run into situations like this where, yeah, we're sitting on the ground. That's no good. So there is an interaction. You'll note the torque increases as we have a shorter bar, decreases as we have a longer bar. This is the length of the torsion bar. It's actually located inside the tank. You'll note the internal space. Suspension takes up a bigger or less portion. That is the length of the bar inside. And this is the width or diameter of that bar. Now, if we lower this all the way down to no length, note it doesn't squat down so much. And as we travel over things, it hits the bottom and top quicker. So it doesn't travel nearly as much. We're starting to get an idea of how these values interact with each other. Get back up here. So the length of the torsion bar gives an indicator of how much suspension travel you want to have. Now let's take a look. Our tank, the hull is 0.3 meters plus 0.7, 1 meter tall. Our road wheels are 3/4 of a meter in diameter. So we have half of 3/4 of a meter. Go with 0.8 just because that makes it a little bit easier. It's actually a little bit less, so maybe 0.75 does work. We'll stay with the 0.75. Assume we're losing a little bit for the size of the mount. The axle goes into the center. That size of that axle gets subtracted. We have about 0.3 meters off the ground, plus 10% for the suspension being lowered, which actually accounts for that axle a little bit. If we really get in here, we can see kind of where that is. And if we adjust that right angle, the wheel stays in place. Because this is the bottom of the bar. We can bring it down to about halfway above, halfway below, 25 degrees, a little bit less, 24 degrees, some angle there, or it would be exactly half. I'm not aiming for that though. Back down to 10. I don't want to set it inwards at all. So if we have 0.3 meters of space between us and the bottom, theoretically 0.3 is what we want. We sit here with the super weak torsion bars, see a lot of travel. Doesn't quite, yeah, that's a lot of travel. Doesn't quite bottom out. Let's see if we'll survive long enough to get over here. Engine damaged, oh no. See if we can hit this hill. where we bottomed it out last time. And the engine's just too weak now. You see our clearance is a little bit better because the wheel maxes out at how high it can go. So there's a balance here between we want to keep this as long as possible, so we make sure the wheels are always making contact with the ground, but we don't want the bottom of the tank to contact the ground. So a really basic understanding of it, just use your ground clearance as the length of your torsion bar, and then adjust the diameter to get what you need. Now, so far, I have not created a spreadsheet for how to calculate torque based on the total mass of the tank, like what would be ideal, and the ideal is not going to be the perfect solution. It depends on the terrain, it depends on what the tank's doing, it depends on the weight balance. There's a lot of factors. If I do make that spreadsheet, I'll share it. But if we just double the diameter, you see how much additional torque we get. It just rockets up. So I would start fairly soggy suspension and start adding in some diameter to that suspension, that torsion bar, until you're seeing not all the travel, but a lot. And you saw it lifted a wheel off because we got the left track up on that hill, and it almost bottomed out there. So maybe it needs to be a little bit stiffer. You did see wheel lift, and you saw the middle wheel as we hit that hill right here started to come off, and the back and the front stayed on. Let's go with 35. That gives us 200 kilonewton meters. That might be about right. Oh yeah, and we're going to have more wheels. At this point, I'm going to go back to our 5-wheel setup. Oh, wrong one. I want the road wheels. You want 5 wheels? Me personally, I want them spread out as much as I can manage. And we adjust the spacing for these to be one right in between each. Not really necessary, but aesthetically it looks the best to me when it's like that. So this suspension might actually be a little bit too stiff. Let's see. Yeah, we're not seeing very much wheel travel, we're not traveling as fast. Seeing some wheel travel. If we want to be able to handle trenches or bigger drops, I would say make the tank have a suspension closer to this. I think we'll went from 3 wheels to 5. Having it will have slightly less than what we saw at the maximum last time. See, we're seeing the wheels actually travel with the terrain now. He's hugging the terrain a bit more because the tractive effort for each track is changing a lot more with 10 wheels than it did with 6. We could even stand to have less than this, but I want to be able to take shocks. So this is a rather short suspension train. 27.5 to 76. I'm looking for about half. I don't have a very good indicator other than what it feels like. Yeah, that's too soggy. Gripping better, but it's too soggy. I'll settle for something like 90. That works. I wish I could give you like, oh yeah, it should travel to about halfway normal circumstances, but it's all going to depend on your wheels. What it looks like is what's reasonable. And you have to adjust other things. Now the damper. The damper is like the shocks in a car. The tooltip is correct. And that makes me feel better about how I understand the game's suspension mechanics. More confident of the torsion bar than I was of the suspension. That's a loader, we don't care. We just care about the suspension and how it's traveling. I like a soggier suspension that allows it to grip better. We're seeing wheel travel. And there's a feel for it. If I get something more solid, I will update the video or release a new one at that time for advanced suspension. I'm just looking for, hey, this is what all the settings do, and this is what works for me. And that looks decent. For example, we could change the suspension all the way up. Wow, we got brewed up immediately. Actually handles it just fine. Yeah, I'm sure the gunner's sight is rocking a lot more. The wheels are actually traveling across the terrain a bit better. And if we minimize it, just as a comparison, woo! That little hell spun us to the right. See the tractive efforts shifting a lot more with these ripples in the terrain. I'm gonna go with like a 20,000 then rather than a 5. Okay, I like that. I think we have the suspension about where I'd like to see it. And we haven't even gotten into the tracks. That was just the suspension. And adjusting the tracks has significant impacts, as we saw, going from 6 wheels to 10. Oh geez. I lost the gunner sight. He's already gone. We have another one over here. Elevate the turret. Nice side shot. A little bit low. He's done. That was a ricochet. There we go. Good hit on the lower glacis. Bounced off a wheel. Hit the driver. And paired impact there. Alright. See how we steer over this ripple. We want to pull to the right before it, and does a much better job staying straight, and it's more controllable. It's still not a super zippy or fast tank. Hit the dirt. Hit the dirt. Over. Over. Dispersion's killing us. Ricochet. Got a shot at the hull. Turret stopped moving. Driver still alive? Yep. There we go. And yeah, there are other ways to handle tweaking the suspension, but that's my basic way and how I can recommend as a tutorial, and I hope it works for you. With that, I'm looking forward to the feedback. I appreciate you staying to the end. Please leave a comment, let me know what you think, and I will see you all next time. Take care, everyone.